Hello students, welcome to your first digital lesson. If you're watching this means that your cohort or your class is digital for 2 days. This lesson is going to accomplish a couple of things. Our main objective is we're going to work on notebook setup. So all of you are required to get a notebook. It can be 100 pages or larger. If you get one that has only 70 pages, that's fine. Just be prepared again to get a new notebook when we run out of space or if we run out of space. So you should all have your notebook at this point. You're going to need that and a pencil or writing utensil for today's lesson. We're also going to create a cover page in this notebook. This is going to start a new unit for us. We're going to create a table of contents where we'll write in order everything we put in our science notebook. And lastly, we are going to create and finish your first set of notes on observations and inferences. Throughout this video, you are going to be stopped and asked to do certain things. You need to complete those tasks before you press on to the next part of the video. So we're trying to get you organized, and we're going to teach you about the first part of our class with observations and inferences. So get out those notebooks and get ready to follow along with the notebook setup. The very first thing that should be in your science notebook is a unit cover page. The very first unit we are doing is called Light and Matter. You are welcome just to write that on the front page and move on, or make it look nice. Next, we have our table of contents, which will tell us the order that we will find everything in our notebook. For this unit, we're going to create one. And the very first thing that we're going to have is observation and inference notes. You may also want to number your pages and record what pages you can find these on as well. The last part of your notebook you're setting up today is your observation and inference notes. Take a look at the picture here. I want you to set something up just like this in your notebook. If you do not have space, please write down round 1, 2, and 3 on the front page and on the back. Create these 4 boxes with observation and inference on the top. You're going to be using these and filling these in based on the activity after this video. So once you have all of these completed, please press continue and we will take notes on observations and inferences. All right, students, we're going to get set with our first round of notes for science. You should have your notebook page set up something similar to this. If you have your 3 rounds on the front page and then on the back page, you have these 2 boxes with observation and inference, that's fine, but we should be seeing this information in your notebook when we see you next. So how this is going to work before we talk about what observations and inferences are is we're going to kind of do a little activity, a little warm-up. We have 3 rounds, round 1, round 2, and round 3. You're going to write down some things you notice in each round, and then you're also going to write down something about that place, and you'll see the questions that go with it, and I'll go back to this page to show you where you write it down. If this seems kind of slow, that's okay. We want you to get in the habit of taking effective notes. So we're going to start slow to eventually pick it up as the year goes on. But we just want to start off small now. So let's go to round 1. So get your pencils ready. Round 1 is there is a picture of a house right here. I want you to write down 3 things you notice about this house. And to help out, there are 3 sentence starters for each of those 3 points below round 1. I notice, I also notice, another thing I notice. So these are great ways to start off your sentences so that we are getting into that habit of speaking in scientific language. Once you write down your 3, you need to tell me what you think about the person who lives in this house. and you're going to write that information in any of this extra space below the 3 on round 1. So you'll have your third thing you notice, and then any of the extra space will be to answer that question. Do your best you can to write out the sentence, but I get that you may have limited space. Just asking to do the best you can. So go ahead, write down those 3 things, and then type in your answer in the Edpuzzle, and we'll move on to round 2. All right, let's move on to round 2. So we're going to be working in this section right here. Same thing. You're going to write down 3 things you notice, and then answer the question at the bottom in any of the space after your third notice. Here's round 2. So there's round 1 again. And now we just zoomed out a little bit on this house. Tell me 3 new things you notice about this house. We have those same sentence starters. I notice, I also notice, another thing I notice. Your new question is very similar, but with this new information, what do you think about the person who lives in this house? Go ahead and write those things down. Type in your answer to this bottom question in the Edpuzzle box below, and make sure you also write it in your notes. All right, we're going to move on to our last round. So you are going to, again, write down 3 things you notice and answer the question at the bottom. So we zoomed out on this house a little bit more. Let's see what the whole house looks like now. Tell me, what are 3 new things that you notice about the same house? We have those same sentence starters. I notice, I also notice, another thing I notice. So now you have all the information. With all the information, sorry about the typo, it should say, what do you think about the person who lives in this house? Again, I apologize for the typo, but it should say, what do you think about the person who lives in this house? I want this one to be a little bit longer because there should be more space here. So answer your question here, and then make sure you type in part of that answer or some things you think about the person in the Edpuzzle box before you can continue. All right. Some of you may recognize this house. For those of you who don't, I will tell you who does live here when we are completely done with the notes. So you wrote all these things down. We're going to come back to these at the very end of the lesson. So make sure that you remember what you wrote down, because you're going to be doing something to each of these things you wrote down in just a moment. But we're going to shift over to these boxes here. You have some notes that we want to get down for these words, observation and inference. So go to that box for observations, because we're going to fill that in. Now, an observation, by definition, a description of something that uses one or more of the 5 senses. So you need to write that in there. For those of you who are visual, it's nice to have a picture to kind of connect everything to. You have 5 senses: sight, sound, touch, taste, and smell. There are actually more senses that humans have, but those are the ones that we use to observe the world. So you can draw on a picture like that to help you remember what an observation is. Something else about an observation is that it has to be a fact. It can't be an opinion. It can't be something that you think or predict. It has to be something that is provable. So if we look at these examples, there are 6 tables in the classroom. If any of you remember our science classrooms, there are those big black tables, and there are 6 of them. So that's a fact. You can go in and prove it. The room is cold. Sorry that this is blocking everyone. You can walk into a room, you can hold up a thermometer, and you can record the temperature, and we can decide if that is cold or warm. Another example, someone's eyes are blue, someone's eyes are green. The cabinets are blue. The grass is green. These are all things that people can look at and can agree are a fact. You don't need the reason why they're that way, just that they are. A non-example would be this. I think science class will be fun this year because there are neat things in the room. Now, this last part is an observation. There are neat things in the room. That's something we can prove. But as soon as we add something like I think or because, we are trying to create a prediction or a reason, and it is no longer an observation. We are using an observation, but it is not an observation itself. Because as soon as we add something with like I think, I predict, or because, it becomes something called becomes something called an inference, and this is your second word. By definition, an inference is a statement that tries to explain a logical conclusion based on an observation. So if you look at our picture here, we have someone thinking and they've got that light bulb going off. So they just think that they came up with a solution or conclusion based on something they saw. Here's an example. And make sure you are writing this in your notes. You can also write in examples of your own. Example, I think we will have a pop quiz tomorrow because our teacher asked us to take out I think we will have a pop quiz because our teacher asked us to take out a pencil and paper. So the observation is pencil and paper, and the inference is that you think that there's going to be a pop quiz because you notice that the teacher asked you to take these out. In the observation example where it asked for science class being fun, the observation was that there are neat things in the room, and the inference was that that person thinks science will be fun because they see all the neat things in the room. So it's trying to explain that observation. A non-example would be the room smells like vanilla. That's just a pure observation. Everyone can come in, everyone can smell it and say, yep, this is totally vanilla. But nobody has explained why or a conclusion for that. So think of inferences. You're trying to explain an observation you see. An observation is just pointing out things that exist and pointing out the facts. All right. Remember that if you have any questions on this, make sure that you bring them in for your teachers the next time you see them so that we can clarify anything between these two. Now you have one final task and then you are finished with this activity for the day. You need to go back to everything that you wrote down in the 3 rounds. So you should have 3 things you noticed and something about the person who lives in the house. You're going to do something to each of the statements. So for each statement, you're going to read it again. If that statement is an observation, you are going to underline it. So just do a quick underline of it if you believe it is an observation. If what you wrote down for any of your statements is an inference, you are going to circle it. So observations will be underlined, inferences will be circled. If you're confused about what we're asking you to do, please try your best, write down any questions you have, and then bring them to class the next time that you see us. You can send us an email if you'd like, but we would like to discuss it in person. So I wrote down a couple of examples up here to help you out. So let's say one of your observations was, I noticed there are 2 cars. That would be an observation because everyone can look at it and say, yep, there are 2 cars in the picture. You're pointing out a fact. I also did an example for inferences. So you may have said something like, I notice or I think they are rich because they have 2 cars. That would be an inference because you are trying to explain why they have 2 cars. So that's your final task. Please do your best. Come back and look at this stuff if you need help. And when you're finished, you are done with your first set of notes. So give yourselves a pat on the back. You did great.